Malik Rivers stood tall, his dark eyes scanning the room, filled with the hum of the city's busiest business district. As the CEO of one of the most successful tech companies in the country, his life was a whirlwind of meetings, phone calls, and constant decision-making. He was no stranger to pressure and expectations. Every day his life seemed like a series of accomplishments and milestones, all meticulously planned. People respected him, and his influence was undeniable. Yet something about all this success left him feeling distant from others, like he was forever separated from the very world he had worked so hard to master. It wasn't that Malik disliked his life, nor was he complaining about his achievements, but success had come at a price. The life he led felt empty in certain ways. He often found himself alone, especially at the end of long days. His colleagues saw him as a leader, not someone to lean on for emotional support. His friends were few, and even the people closest to him could never truly understand the struggles he faced as a black CEO in a cutthroat industry. There were days when he longed for something more, something genuine, something real. On a particular afternoon, Malik decided to step away from his usual routine. He left the luxury of his office in the high-rise building behind and walked to a nearby company cafeteria, hoping for a small break. He didn't need much, just a moment of quiet, a chance to recharge. The cafeteria was one of the few places where Malik could blend in, unnoticed by the staff and employees who usually revered him. He liked the simplicity of it, a contrast to the formalities of board meetings and corporate events. As Malik entered the cafeteria, he noticed the usual rush of employees. The chatter of voices filled the air, and the sound of trays clattering against tables echoed in the space. He made his way to the counter, picked up his food, and then paused. There, sitting at a small table in the corner of the room, was a young woman. She was completely out of place in the bustling cafeteria. While the others were dressed in the latest office attire, she wore simple, faded clothes. Nothing special, just a worn jacket and a pair of jeans. She sat by herself, her head slightly bent as she stared down at the bowl of soup in front of her. Her expression was quiet, almost distant. Malik noticed how different she seemed from everyone else. Most people in the cafeteria were either talking or laughing, but she was alone in her silence. Her body language suggested that she was deep in thought, or perhaps lost in the weight of something bigger than the meal she was eating. Her name was Leah, Malik would later learn. But in this moment, as he observed her from across the room, he didn't know her name. He didn't even know her story, but there was something about her that caught his attention. Perhaps it was the sadness in her eyes or the way she seemed so untouched by the chaos around her. It was as if she was in a world of her own, surrounded by people but separated by an invisible barrier. For reasons he couldn't explain, Malik felt drawn to her. It wasn't like him to focus on someone he didn't know, but he couldn't shake the feeling that she was different. He tried to ignore the feeling, telling himself that it was just an ordinary encounter, that it was nothing worth thinking twice about. He grabbed his tray of food and found a seat at the far end of the room. He tried to focus on his meal, but his mind kept drifting back to the young woman in the corner. Something about her vulnerability called to him. Maybe it was because, despite his power and position, he often felt that same sense of isolation. He had built an empire, but what did that matter when no one truly understood him? As he sat there trying to eat his food, Malik couldn't help but glance back at her every now and then. She was still sitting there, untouched by the noise around her, her spoon stirring the soup absent-mindedly. She seemed so far removed from the rest of the world, as if she didn't belong. But Malik knew that feeling. He knew what it was like to feel like an outsider, even in a crowd. It was then that something unexpected happened. Leah, without looking up from her bowl, muttered something softly. Her voice was barely audible over the sound of the cafeteria. Malik wasn't even sure if she had spoken to him directly, but the words he heard caught his attention instantly. "Please. May I have your food?" At first, Malik thought he had misheard. He blinked and looked around to see if someone else was the object of her plea, but no one else seemed to have noticed. It was him she was speaking to. Her words were quiet, almost hesitant, as if she wasn't sure if she should ask. And yet, there was a certain dignity in the way she spoke, No desperation, just a simple request. For a brief moment, Malik was stunned. He hadn't expected anyone to speak to him, let alone in such a way. Was she asking for charity? Or was there something deeper behind her words? He looked at her again, trying to read her expression. She didn't seem to be begging. Instead, she looked almost resigned to the situation, as though she had asked for something out of necessity, not desire. Malik paused, his mind racing. Should he ignore her? Should he continue with his meal as if nothing had happened? But something inside him urged him to respond. His heart stirred in a way he hadn't expected. Maybe it was the way she looked, at him, quiet, vulnerable, yet filled with a strength he couldn't quite name. Or maybe it was the simple fact that in that moment her request felt genuine. He stood up from his table and walked toward her slowly. His footsteps were soft, almost uncertain. As he approached, Leah looked up at him, her eyes wide with surprise, as if she hadn't expected him to come over. She quickly straightened up, ready to apologize, but Malik raised a hand to stop her. "Why do you ask?" Malik's voice was steady, though there was a softness to it, an interest that hadn't been there before. Leah hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to respond. She had never expected to be spoken to like this, especially by someone so powerful. I haven't eaten all day," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I don't want to take your food. It just looked like you weren't eating much. And I didn't want to waste it." Malik studied her carefully. It wasn't the first time he had seen someone struggle, but there was something different about Leah, something that made him pause. Perhaps it was the way she had asked, not out of shame or desperation, but out of pure necessity. She didn't want to take advantage of him, but there was no denying the need in her eyes. Malik thought about his own life for a moment. He had more than enough, yet he often found himself feeling empty. He had everything anyone could want, thriving business, wealth, power. But there were moments when he felt as though none of it mattered. It was in these moments, when he saw someone like Leah, that the emptiness inside him seemed louder. Without a second thought, Malik took a deep breath and, with a small smile, slid his tray over to her. "If you're hungry, then you're welcome to share," he said simply. Leah's eyes widened in disbelief. She didn't know what to say. For a moment she was frozen. The man she had just seen as a stranger, a CEO no less, was offering her his meal, his food. A part of her wanted to refuse, to stand on her own, but another part of her felt a deep gratitude. This man didn't owe her anything, yet here he was offering something with no strings attached. "Thank you," she whispered, barely able to believe what was happening. The two of them sat there in silence for a moment, sharing the meal, neither one fully understanding what had just transpired. It was a simple act, one that most would overlook. But to Malik and Leah, it felt like something much more significant. It was the beginning of a connection neither of them could have anticipated. After that moment in the cafeteria, things began to change for both Malik and Leah. What started as a brief encounter over a shared meal turned into something neither of them had expected. For Malik, it was a small act of kindness, one he had done countless times in his life without thinking much about it. Yet something about Leah's quiet gratitude and the way she accepted the gesture stuck with him. Malik found himself thinking about her more often than he cared to admit. He had been used to people wanting something from him, whether it was money, connections, or just to be near him for the sake of his status. But Leah had asked for nothing except a simple meal, and even then, she hadn't pushed for more than what she needed. There was something disarming about her simplicity, something he couldn't quite shake off. The next time Malik visited the cafeteria, he was determined to see if she would be there. He didn't know why he was looking for her. It wasn't like him to search for someone in a place like this. But there was something in her eyes that had lingered in his mind long after they'd shared that meal. When he walked into the cafeteria, he immediately scanned the room. His gaze stopped when he saw her sitting in the same corner, alone as usual, with her head slightly bent over a cup of tea. This time, instead of just observing from afar, Malik approached her table. He wasn't sure what he was going to say or how he was going to start the conversation, but he was curious. There was a part of him that wanted to know more about her, about the life she led, the struggles she faced. He had shared a moment with her, but that had been all. He wanted to know the story behind her eyes, the story she had kept hidden behind the walls of her quiet demeanor. Leah looked up when Malik approached, her eyes wide with a mix of surprise and wariness. She probably hadn't expected him to seek her out again, let alone initiate a conversation. But Malik smiled at her, a small, reassuring smile that made her feel a little more at ease. "Mind if I join you?" Malik asked, his voice steady but kind. Leah hesitated, unsure whether she should let him sit. She had never been the type to draw attention to herself, and here was a powerful man, the CEO of a major company, asking to sit with her. But there was something in Malik's manner, something in the way he carried himself, that made her feel that he wasn't just trying to make a point or show off his position. He was genuine. "Sure," Leah said, her voice barely a whisper. She shifted slightly, to make room for him, not knowing exactly what to expect but feeling a strange comfort in his presence. Malik sat down across from her. He didn't bring up the food from the last time. Instead, he simply asked, "How have you been?" His question was casual, but there was an undercurrent of curiosity. He wanted to know more about her, the kind of life she led. He didn't want to pry, but he also didn't want to seem like he was ignoring the deeper question that had been tugging at his mind. Why was she always alone? Leah paused before responding. It was difficult for her to open up to people. She had learned early on that the fewer people knew about her struggles, the better. People tended to judge quickly, and she didn't want to be seen as someone who needed pity. But something about Malik made her feel that maybe it was okay to talk. Maybe he wouldn't judge her the way others had. "I'm okay," she said softly, not wanting to say too much. Just trying to make it through each day." Malik nodded, sensing that there was more she wasn't saying. He knew that just trying to make it through each day could mean a lot of different things, and there was no way of knowing for sure what Leah was dealing with. He didn't press her for more, but he wanted to offer her something that could make her life just a little bit easier. "Do you like working here?" Malik asked after a brief silence. Leah blinked, caught off guard by the question. It wasn't the kind of thing someone like Malik Rivers would normally ask. People who had power or wealth often overlooked the lives of the people who worked for them, seeing them as just another part of the system. But here was Malik asking her about her life, treating her as if she mattered. It's not the best job," she said hesitantly, "but it's steady. It helps pay the bills." Malik could sense the unspoken sadness in her voice. He knew that for someone like Leah, steady was a euphemism for a job that didn't give her much in terms of opportunity or growth. It wasn't the kind of job that people aspired to have, but it was the kind of job that kept people from falling too far. And for Leah, that was all she had right now. They sat in silence for a moment, each lost in their own thoughts. Malik couldn't help but think about the lives of people like Leah, the ones who worked hard every day, not for the thrill of success, but just to survive. It was something he had never truly experienced. Even in his own struggles, he had always had a safety net. He had never been forced to choose between paying bills or buying food, between holding onto a job or risking everything for something better. It was a privilege he knew he could never take for granted. Leah, on the other hand, had lived that reality for as long as she could remember. Every day was a balancing act, and every choice felt like a risk. She didn't have the luxury of time or comfort, but even with all of that, there was something about Malik's presence that made her feel like she didn't have to keep up the walls anymore. As they sat there, a quiet understanding seemed to pass between them. Malik didn't say much more that day, but just his presence felt different from anything Leah had ever known. It wasn't about the status, the money, or the power. It was about something deeper, an unspoken connection. Malik knew he couldn't change her life in a single conversation, But he also knew that sometimes just being there for someone could make all the difference. Over the next few days, Malik found himself returning to the cafeteria more often. Each time he would seek out Leah, and each time they would have brief conversations, nothing too deep but enough to establish a connection. He started to see past the surface, to see the resilience in her, the quiet strength that came from fighting every day just to survive. It was something Malik respected deeply, something he recognized in her that he couldn't find in the people around him. Leah, too, began to look forward to these small moments with Malik. He didn't judge her or treat her like someone to be pitied. He didn't see her as an employee or a charity case. He saw her as a person, someone who deserved respect, and that more than anything was what made her feel like maybe, just maybe, there was a chance for something more in her life. Not just for her, but for him too. One day, as they sat across from each other, Malik finally said something that made Leah pause. "I've been thinking," he began, his voice thoughtful. "You're someone who's trying to make the best of things, and I respect that. If you ever want to explore other opportunities beyond this job, let me know. I may not have all the answers, but I'd like to help you." Leah looked up at him, surprise written across her face. She wasn't sure if he was serious, but for the first time in a long time, she felt a flicker of hope. Malik's offer was simple, but in that moment, it meant more than words could say. It wasn't just about the job. It was about the chance to make a real difference in her life, to open a door she had never thought would be possible. And for the first time, Leah felt that maybe, just maybe, her life could change. As the days went by, Malik and Leah's connection continued to grow. It wasn't just about the moments they spent in the cafeteria, but about something deeper that began to form between them. For Malik, these small interactions with Leah were different from anything he had experienced before. He had always been surrounded by people, business partners, employees, friends, but there was something unique about Leah. She didn't treat him like a CEO or a businessman. She treated him like a person. It wasn't because she didn't know who he was. On the contrary, she had heard of him like everyone else had. He was a household name in the business world, a man whose company had revolutionized technology. But Leah didn't care about any of that. To her, Malik was just a man who had offered her food on a lonely day. He had shown her kindness when she hadn't expected it, and that was something she valued more than his wealth or status. For Leah, Malik represented a kind of mystery. He was a man who seemed to have everything, but he still came to the cafeteria, to eat with the employees, to share moments with people who, in the grand scheme of things, didn't have much. She had grown up seeing people like Malik, wealthy, powerful, and they were always surrounded by others who admired them. But Malik didn't seem to be surrounded by admiration when he sat with her. He was just another person looking for something real. She had always thought that people like Malik never truly understood what it was like to struggle, to face challenges every day. But as their conversations grew, Leah began to see a different side of him. Malik wasn't the man everyone thought he was. Yes, he had wealth and power, but he also had a lot of loneliness. He had built an empire, but at the end of the day, he didn't have people who truly understood him. There was always a wall between him and the rest of the world. He had everything, but in some ways it had come at a cost. Malik had never shared so much about his personal life before. He was used to keeping his thoughts to himself, especially when it came to emotions. His company, his work, had always been his focus. But somehow Leah made him feel comfortable in a way that no one else ever had. He could talk to her about things he had never discussed with anyone else. It wasn't that he wanted to burden her with his problems, but there was a part of him that found solace in her quiet presence. One afternoon, as they sat together, Malik spoke about his life in a way he never had before. "You know, I never really thought much about the loneliness that comes with success," he said, his voice almost sounding distant. "I was so focused on building something, creating something that would last, that I forgot what it was like to just live without all the pressure and expectations." Leah listened quietly, knowing that he wasn't looking for sympathy. It was just a simple truth he had spoken. She didn't know how to respond at first, but then she said, I think it's easy to forget that no matter how successful we are, we're still human. We still need people and we still need connection. Even the strongest person needs someone to share their thoughts with. Malik nodded slowly, his gaze softening. It was the first time he had ever heard someone say something like that. People often told him that he was strong, that he could handle anything. But no one ever spoke about the human side of success, the emotional cost that came with always being in control, always being the one everyone looked to. Their conversations continued, each one growing deeper. Malik learned more about Leah's life, the struggles she faced every day, and the sacrifices she had made to keep her family afloat. Leah had grown up in a small town where opportunities were scarce, and dreams often felt like distant fantasies. But despite all the challenges, Leah had always been determined. She was strong, independent, and fiercely protective of her younger brother, who relied on her after their parents had passed away. She worked tirelessly to make sure he had a chance at a better life. But it wasn't always easy. There were days when she wondered if she was doing enough, if she was doing the right thing. It felt like she was always running, never really able to catch her breath. But she pushed through because that's what she had to do. She didn't have the luxury of stopping. One evening, after a particularly long day at work, Malik and Leah sat together in the cafeteria. The noise of the room felt distant, as if they were in their own world. Malik could tell that something was on Leah's mind. She hadn't spoken much, and there was a certain tension in her posture. He wanted to ask her what was wrong, but he didn't want to push her if she wasn't ready to share. Finally, Leah spoke, her voice soft but steady. I've been thinking a lot about what you said, she began, about people needing connections. I don't know if you understand what it's like. To always be the one holding things together, to always have to be strong. Malik looked at her, his expression softening. He understood more than she realized. He knew what it was like to feel the weight of the world on your shoulders, to feel like you had to be everything to everyone and still somehow keep it all together. I think I understand more than you think, Malik said quietly. Sometimes when you're always the one who has to be strong, you forget that it's okay to lean on someone else. You don't have to carry it all by yourself. Leah's eyes met his, and for the first time, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she didn't have to carry it all alone. She had spent so much time trying to prove to herself and others that she could handle everything, that she had forgotten how to let others in. As their friendship deepened, they began to spend more time together outside of the cafeteria. Malik would often invite Leah to lunch and they would talk for hours, sometimes about serious things, sometimes about nothing at all. But each time they were together, it felt like something important was happening, something real and unspoken. Malik also began to notice changes in himself. The pressure of running a company was always there, but the moments he shared with Leah made it easier to breathe. It was like she was a grounding force in his life, a reminder that there was more to life than business and success. He had always focused on creating something that would last, but now he realized that the connections he made with people, real, genuine connections, were the things that truly lasted. Leah, too, began to feel the shift. She had always been focused on surviving, on getting by. But now she was beginning to see that there was more to life than just making it through each day. She started to believe that her dreams, the ones she had put on hold for so long, might actually be possible. Malik had opened her eyes to the idea that maybe she didn't have to do it all on her own, that she didn't have to be stuck in a cycle of survival. There was room for something more. One day, as they sat across from each other, Malik looked at Leah with a gentle smile. You know, he said, I don't think I ever truly understood what it meant to have a real connection with someone. But now I think I get it. It's not about what we have or what we do. It's about the people we share our lives with. Leah smiled, the warmth of his words sinking in. She had never imagined that someone like Malik would understand her, that someone who had everything could understand the struggles of someone like her. But in that moment, she realized that they weren't so different after all. They were both just two people, trying to make sense of their lives, trying to find a way to connect. And in that connection, they both found something more valuable than any success or achievement they could ever claim. They found a sense of peace, a reminder that no matter where life took them, they didn't have to face it alone. As the weeks passed, Malik and Leah's bond grew even stronger. What had started as a simple act of kindness in the cafeteria had blossomed into something more meaningful. They weren't just sharing meals anymore. They were sharing their lives. Each time they met, they opened up a little more, and every conversation seemed to bring them closer together. Leah had become a regular presence in Malik's life. He no longer just visited the cafeteria for a quick meal. Instead, he started finding reasons to go, hoping to see her. Sometimes they would talk about their work or their days, but often the conversations turned to more personal topics: the dreams they had, the struggles they faced, and the things they wished they could change about their lives. For Leah, these moments with Malik were a welcome break from the pressures of her own life. She had always been responsible, always the one holding everything together for her brother, but Malik's presence offered her something different: a space to relax, to let her guard down, and to just be herself. She didn't have to worry about being the strong one when she was with him. Malik listened to her with patience and understanding, never judging her, never making her feel like she had to carry the weight of the world alone. But despite the connection they had, Leah had her doubts. She wasn't sure if she was ready to let someone like Malik into her world. He was successful, wealthy, and influential, while she was struggling to make ends meet. How could someone like him understand the challenges of someone like her? And yet there was something in Malik's eyes, the way he looked at her, the way he treated her, that made her believe he truly understood. He wasn't like other people she had met. He didn't look at her like a charity case. He looked at her as if she was someone worth knowing, someone worth being around. Malik, on the other hand, had started to feel something he hadn't felt in a long time: hope. For years, he had been focused on his business, his success, and his image. He had put everything into building his empire, and yet, despite all the wealth and recognition, something was missing. It was only when he started spending time with Leah that he realized what he had been missing: real connection. He had always been surrounded by people who admired him for his success, but no one had ever truly seen him for who he was. Someone who had built a life on his own, someone who had struggled and fought to get where he was. As Malik and Leah spent more time together, he found himself opening up more than he ever had before. He started to talk about his own past, about how he grew up in a neighborhood where opportunity was scarce, about the hardships he faced early on, and about the lonely nights he spent working to make his dreams a reality. For the first time, he wasn't just the CEO. He was Malik, the man who had fought to get to where he was. Leah listened intently, fascinated by his story. She had always seen him as someone who had it all, but hearing about the challenges he had faced made her see him in a different light. He wasn't just the successful businessman she had assumed him to be. He was a person who had worked hard, who had struggled, and who had fought against the odds, and that made her respect him even more. It wasn't long before Malik began to realize that Leah had something to offer that he had never considered. She had an inner strength, a resilience that came from her ability to keep going despite all the obstacles in her life. Malik admired her for this. She didn't complain about her situation. She just worked hard and kept pushing forward. She had dreams, but they were buried under the weight of her responsibilities. She had never asked for help, never expected anyone to come to her rescue. But Malik saw something in her, a potential, a fire that she had yet to fully tap into. One evening, as they sat together after a long day, Malik decided to speak up. "Leah," he began, his voice serious, "I've been thinking a lot about what you said when we first met, about how you're just trying to make it through each day. I think you deserve more than that. You have so much potential, and I don't think you even realize how much you could achieve if you had the right opportunities." Leah looked at him, surprised by his words. She hadn't expected him to say something like that. She had always thought of herself as someone who was stuck, someone who was always struggling to stay afloat. But Malik didn't see her that way. He saw her as someone with promise, someone who could rise above her circumstances if given the chance. "Do you mean that?" she asked quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. Malik nodded, his gaze steady. "I do. I think you could do more than just survive. You have a lot of talent and I want to help you tap into it. I'm not offering you something easy. Life will still be tough, but I want to help you find a way to make it easier for you. To help you move forward in a way that's true to you." Leah was speechless. She had never imagined that someone like Malik would offer to help her. She had always assumed that people like him only helped those who already had the means to succeed, people who were already on the right path. But Malik was offering her something different, a chance to change her life, to step into something bigger than she had ever dreamed possible. "I don't know what to say," Leah finally replied, her eyes filled with a mix of gratitude and uncertainty. "I've always had to figure things out on my own. I don't know if I'm ready to take a chance like that." Malik smiled, understanding her hesitation. "I get it," he said. "But sometimes taking a chance is the only way to break free from what's holding you back. You don't have to do it alone, Leah. I can help guide you, but you're the one who has to take the first step." Leah looked at him for a long moment, the weight of his words sinking in. She had always been the one holding everything together, the one who never asked for help. But here was Malik, offering her something real, something that could change her future. The thought of stepping out of her comfort zone was terrifying, but at the same time, it felt like a door had just opened. Maybe, just maybe, she could take that step. The next few days were a whirlwind of emotions for Leah. She kept thinking about Malik's offer, wondering if it was something she could truly do. She had spent so long putting everyone else's needs first that she had forgotten what it was like to think about her own future. But now, Malik had shown her a different path, one where she could have a chance at something more than just surviving. On the day she finally made her decision, Leah walked into the cafeteria, feeling both nervous and excited. She spotted Malik, sitting at his usual spot looking over some papers. When he saw her, he smiled, and Leah felt a warmth spread through her chest. "I've been thinking about what you said," she said, her voice steady but full of emotion. "I'm ready to take that step. I'm ready to try." Malik looked up at her, his eyes lighting up with a mix of pride and excitement. "I'm proud of you, Leah. You won't regret it." In that moment, Leah felt like something had shifted inside her. She was no longer just a person trying to survive each day. She was someone who had the potential to build a future for herself. And with Malik's help, she knew that she was about to embark on a journey that could change everything. The sun was setting, painting the city sky with soft shades of orange and pink. Malik stood quietly near the large window in his office, holding a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. His thoughts were far from business meetings and financial reports. All he could think about was Leah. Her decision to take a chance on herself had touched something deep inside him. She didn't have much, but she had courage. The kind of quiet strength that doesn't show off but shines when life gets tough. That day in the cafeteria, when she said she was ready to try, something had shifted for both of them. Malik knew helping Leah wasn't just about offering her a better job. It was about believing in her. It was about giving her a space where her voice mattered, where she could grow and stand tall on her own. And Leah had done just that. In only a few weeks, she had stepped into a new role with heart, effort, and an eagerness to learn that impressed everyone. He had placed her in a community outreach program under his company's development wing, a team that worked closely with real people, those often overlooked. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was meaningful. It gave Leah a platform to help others, just like she had once needed help herself. At first, Leah felt like she didn't belong. The office felt too polished, the people too confident. She doubted herself every morning before walking through the big glass doors. But each time she remembered Malik's words, "You deserve more than just surviving." So she kept showing up. She asked questions. She stayed late to finish her work. She listened carefully and took notes. The small wins, like completing a report on her own or leading a meeting, boosted her confidence. Day by day, she began to believe that she had something to offer, and the people around her began to see it too. Her supervisor, a kind woman named Janice, often told Malik, "That girl you brought in, Leah, she's got something special. She's not afraid to start small, and she's got a big heart." Malik would just smile, feeling proud but not surprised. He always believed in Leah. He just knew others would see it too in time. Outside of work, their bond continued to grow. They still met in the cafeteria sometimes, though their conversations were a bit different now. There was more laughter, more ease, but also more trust. Malik had opened a door for Leah, but she had walked through it on her own. And now, the gap between their worlds no longer felt so wide. One Friday afternoon, after a long work week, Malik surprised Leah with an invitation to a quiet dinner at a small family-owned restaurant he loved. It wasn't fancy or loud, just peaceful, the kind of place where you could talk for hours without being disturbed. Leah accepted with a shy smile, and that evening, as they sat across from each other, sharing warm food and stories about their day, something gentle began to bloom between them. It wasn't just friendship anymore. It was something deeper. They didn't need to say much. Their eyes spoke for them. There was comfort there, and respect. Malik admired Leah's determination. Leah admired Malik's humility. Together, they balanced each other in a way neither had expected. As the meal ended, Leah placed her napkin down and looked across the table. "I still remember the day I asked for your food," she said softly, a small smile playing on her lips. Malik chuckled, shaking his head. "I remember thinking, who is this brave girl? Who's not afraid to speak her truth?" "It wasn't bravery," Leah replied. "It was hunger, but not just for food. I think I was hungry for something more. A moment of kindness. A reason to believe the world could still surprise me." Malik's heart stirred again, just like it had that first day. "And I'm glad I listened." They walked out of the restaurant, side by side. The night was cool and the streetlights glowed softly. Malik glanced at Leah as she spoke about a project she was working on. Her face lit up with purpose. It amazed him how far she had come in such a short time. But what amazed him even more was how much she had changed him. Before Leah, he had lived with walls around his heart. He had been so focused on his goals that he had forgotten what it meant to slow down, to care deeply, to let someone in. But Leah had reminded him, quietly, gently, that real connection doesn't come from power or success. It comes from honesty, from kindness, and from shared struggle. Sometime later, Malik invited Leah to a company event where he was giving a speech. At first, Leah felt nervous being among so many important people. But when Malik introduced her to the crowd, not as someone he had helped, but as someone he deeply respected, she felt a sense of pride she had never known before. "This is Leah," Malik said. "She reminds us all that courage isn't always loud. Sometimes it's found in quiet steps and showing up every day even when it's hard. She inspires me." The audience clapped politely, but Leah barely noticed. Her eyes were on Malik, filled with gratitude. That evening they sat together once again, not in a cafeteria, not in a restaurant, but on a bench in the city park, where the breeze carried the scent of summer flowers. "Do you think life always surprises us like this?" Leah asked. "Sometimes," Malik answered. "But sometimes we just have to be willing to see the beauty in unexpected places." "I'm glad I found mine," Leah said, her voice barely above a whisper. "So am I," Malik replied, reaching gently for her hand. They didn't need grand promises or dramatic moments. What they had was real, built slowly with respect and care. They came from different worlds, but their hearts had found a home in each other's presence. Leah still faced challenges, and Malik still had responsibilities that weighed on him, but now they were no longer facing life alone. It had started with a simple question. "Please, may I have your food?" But it ended with something much greater, a bond that reminded them both what it meant to be seen, to be valued, and to be truly connected. Together, they stepped forward into a future they hadn't planned for, but one they were ready to embrace, hand in hand, heart to heart.